Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 73 of the Reluctant Leader podcast with Paul Jenkins. That's me. This episode, by the way, is dropping on a unique day for me personally. As you're listening to this, I'm actually stepping away for a week with my family on a vacation. No sermons to prepare, no meetings to lead, no podcasts to record, no major projects to push forward, just space. And if I'm being honest, that's exciting and a little bit uncomfortable because, y'all, I love what I do. But I've also discovered something about myself over the years. I can become so focused on moving forward that it's easy to forget that God is not usually in as much of a hurry as I am. Maybe you can relate. Most of us spend our lives trying to catch up. We're behind on emails. We're behind on projects. We're behind on goals. We're behind on expectations. We feel like we're behind on life. And before long, hurry becomes our normal pace. The problem is that while our bodies can sometimes sustain that pace for a season, our souls were never designed to. So today, I want to start this podcast by asking you a simple question. What if God isn't rushing you? And we live in a world that worships speed. Faster internet, faster shipping, faster growth, faster results. We have become so accustomed to measuring progress by velocity. The quicker something happens, the more successful we assume that it is. But when we read the Gospels, Jesus feels almost frustratingly slow. People are sick, so Jesus stops along the way for a conversation. People are hungry, so before feeding them, he says, "Sit down." A ruler's daughter is dying. Jesus pauses to talk with the woman in the crowd. Lazarus is sick. Jesus waits 2 more days before leaving. Can you imagine trying to run a modern organization like that? The disciples must have constantly felt like Jesus was moving too slowly. Yet somehow he was never late, never rushed, never frantic, doesn't seem to ever react, because Jesus understood something that we often forget. Urgency and faithfulness are not the same thing. Now, there's a reason why we hurry. Most of us think that our hurry comes from our schedule, but I don't think that's usually true. I think our hurry often comes from our fears. Fear of falling behind, fear of disappointing people, the fear of missing opportunities, fear of not mattering, the fear that if we were to stop producing, we might discover our value is tied to our performance all along. This is where my doctoral work around attachment has been so helpful for me, because securely attached people can slow down because they trust that they're loved. And insecurely attached people often feel compelled to prove that they're lovable. That doesn't just show up in relationships, y'all. It shows up in leadership. It shows up in ministry and in parenting. It shows up in our work. Gosh, it shows up in our life. Sometimes we're not running toward success. What we're actually doing is we're running away from insecurity. Jesus had a different pace than ours. One of my favorite verses is Mark 3:14. It says that Jesus appointed 12 that they might be with him, not work for him, not perform for him, not impress him. Be with him. Before there was ministry, there was relationship. Before there was mission, there was attachment. Before there was doing, there was being. I wonder how much of our exhaustion comes from reversing that order. We've become experts at doing things for Jesus while forgetting how to simply be with him. And eventually, the soul starts sending signals. Fatigue, irritability, distraction, numbness, cynicism. Not because we're weak, simply because we're human. And humans have limits. God knew that, and he still does. We're usually the last ones to admit it. Now, as this episode releases, I told you I'm headed away for a week with my family. And I wish I could tell you that stepping away has always come naturally for me, but it hasn't. It was easy to spend a week away thinking about what I could be accomplishing or what I needed to do or what I could be producing, what I could be checking off of a list. But what I've learned and what I'm still learning is this: rest isn't a reward for finishing everything, because you'll never finish everything. Rest is an act of trust. It's looking at an unfinished world and believing that God is still at work. It's remembering that I'm a servant, not the Savior. And honestly, maybe that's what I need most this week. Not productivity and not achievement, not progress. What I need is presence. Because the goal of spiritual formation isn't becoming more productive or more efficient. It's becoming more like Jesus. And Jesus was never in a hurry. So let me leave you with a question. What would change this week if you truly believe that God was not rushing you? How would you pray differently, lead differently, parent differently, work differently? How would you rest differently? Maybe the invitation of Jesus isn't to move faster. Maybe it's to walk closely enough with him that his pace becomes your pace. And if that's true, perhaps the most spiritual thing you can do today isn't speed up, it's slow down. Hey, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Reluctant Leader podcast. Like I said, I'm going to be spending the next week practicing what I just talked about, and I would encourage you to find ways to do the same. You may not be able to take a week away from all the demands in your life, but we all need to find ways to step away, not because the work is finished, but because it isn't and never will be. Jesus was never in a hurry, and we don't have to be either. He trusted the Father's timing, and so can we. So until next time, remember that God's not rushing you. Keep giving him your best and trust him with the rest.